My next patron question is from Graham, who wants to know why Disney has not done any sequels or remakes to one of their animated films. Out of all the Disney films that are being reinvented for new audiences, The Great Mouse Detective has managed to avoid it. The movie never received any sequels, especially during the direct-to-video era, which seemed like a ripe opportunity. It never received an animated series or any TV adaptation, and there are currently no plans to give it the live-action remake treatment. How was The Great Mouse Detective able to dodge franchise fatigue? It is surprising that the film is not one Disney has sought to capitalize on, especially considering its place in the studio's history. Who Framed Roger Rabbit and The Little Mermaid are largely credited for sparking the Disney Renaissance in the late 80s and 90s. However, had The Great Mouse Detective not performed well following the failure of Black Cauldron, that might have been it for feature animation at the Mouse House. The solid box office and positive critic and audience reaction showed there was still an audience for these films. Ron Clements, John Musker, Bernie Madison, and Dave Michener made a film of that classic Disney storytelling, but in a way that appealed to modern family movie audiences, who'd gravitated more towards the big-budget blockbuster entertainment of Spielberg and Lucas. When Disney began its trend of making television shows based on their animated movies and direct-to-video sequels, you would think Basil Baker Street would be an ideal candidate. Eve Titus, the author of the original stories that the movie was based on, even wrote 5 books detailing the escapades of Basil and his friend Dawson. The film also ends with them taking on a new case, so it's unusual that no sequel was produced, even when they were making one right after the other. The first logical reasoning might be that other than The Little Mermaid, Disney does not pay that much attention to the animated films they produced in the 80s. After all, Oliver & Company hasn't gotten any sort of follow-up either. However, they did release The Fox and the Hound 2 in 2006. The first Fox and the Hound was a hit back in 1981, but it's still very surprising Disney decided to greenlight another film. They made sequels to films that had proper conclusions, in some cases choosing to make them midquels as a result, but a movie about a detective who takes on multiple cases did not inspire any kind of new story at Disney. Basil and Dawson is shown in the final scene, talking to a client and listening to her story. That's a great jumping off point for a sequel storyline. Dawson also narrates in the closing moments that he and Basil had many cases together over the years. When the movie was released in 1986, Disney already had their television animation unit up and running, so it's surprising The Great Mouse Detective did not become their first film-based series. Curiously, when Tad Stones pitched a show about rodent crime solvers to Disney in the late 80s, his original concept was based on The Rescuers. That was rejected, as The Rescuers Down Under was already in the works at the time. However, rather than go for that other recent animated film about mice heroes coming to the rescue, Chip and Dale were made the stars instead. Although Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers turned out to be a pretty great show, so no complaints from me. And now we have the current trend of making remakes of their animated movies. At some point they're going to run out of the really big ones, and it's possible The Great Mouse Detective could be a candidate. Although if they were to revisit the story, I would rather it be a straight adaptation of Eve Titus's books rather than remaking the earlier film. I find it unusual when people complain about the Disney remakes doing things differently, like what happened with Mulan recently. Why do you want the exact same movie again? If you want to watch a film based on the Chinese legend where she hangs out with a wisecracking dragon and a cute cricket and sings songs about reflections and getting down to business to defeat the Huns, that already exists. There's already been talk of a photorealistic CG remake of Robin Hood and a live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch, so I won't be surprised if a Great Mouse Detective one is announced. Or maybe Disney will keep on ignoring the film. To be honest, if they were to revisit it, my choice would be as a 2D animated series for Disney+. Barry Ingham and Val Bedden, the voices of Basil and Dawson, have sadly passed away, so if they were to find new voices, they would probably get someone like Tom Hiddleston for Basil and Hugh Bonneville for Dawson. Although I should point out, they both did briefly appear on an episode of House of Mouse, with Maurice LaMarche providing Basil's one line. Anyway, do you think Disney should do something with The Great Mouse Detective? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for your question, Graham.